And the next item of business is Members' Business Debate on Motion 14820 in the name of Emma Harper on the 30th World AIDS Day. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would ask those who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now. And I call on Emma Harper to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. December 1st marks World AIDS Day, and I'm pleased to be able to reflect on the importance of this day on the 30th anniversary this year. Today is an opportunity to raise awareness of HIV and the impact that the stigma and the prejudice surrounding HIV and AIDS has on the people diagnosed and undiagnosed. Firstly, I'd like to thank my colleagues across Chamber who have supported my motion and for taking part in this debate. And I welcome those in the gallery here today and also those watching online. The debate allows the opportunity to reflect on the past 30 years of infection, detection, diagnosis and now successful treatment. Today in Scotland, there are 5,134 people that are diagnosed with HIV and 350 new cases each year are diagnosed. Presiding Officer, I cannot stress enough how important it is to get the message across to everyone that once a person has received a diagnosis and appropriate treatment, and once a person becomes undetectable in their viral load of the HIV virus, they cannot pass on the virus through sexual transmission. Last week in Parliament, I met with Murray Cheek and Grant Sugden from Waverley Care to discuss their work. Waverley Care, alongside NHS boards across Scotland, are doing important work to promote the importance of people knowing their HIV status, as well as to promote the undetectable equals untransmittable, U equals U message, which is a key focus of this 30th anniversary World AIDS Day. Again, this means that if a person living with HIV achieves and maintains an undetectable viral load by adhering to their medication, the HIV virus cannot be passed on through sex. In preparation for this debate, I reflected on my time at Cedars-Sinai Medical Centre in the heart of West Hollywood in Los Angeles in the early 90s. And I contacted my former colleague, Jackie Engstrand, who worked as a research nurse in the dedicated HIV and AIDS unit known as the Unit, set up in 1991. This was when the model of care for people with AIDS focused on a palliative end-of-life care approach. By the early 90s, we knew that HIV was a blood-borne virus that weakened the immune system, and when left untreated, people had a range of potentially deadly infections. Back then, I looked after patients with a rare skin condition called Kaposi sarcoma, as well as pneumocystis carinii pneumonia patients, and that's a rare lung condition infection that is often one of the infections seen in people with HIV. The stigma associated with HIV was evident. I recall people referring to the disease as gay-related immune disease, GRID, which was distressing for patients, but we have made progress since then. And as a nurse, I knew that the HIV virus was transmitted through sex and sharing of needles. It was not just a gay man's disease. While I was in the pre-op area in the operating room one day, I had an interesting experience when I witnessed a colleague's nervous, anxious behaviour when he was speaking to a patient ahead of the surgery, and this patient had a diagnosis of AIDS. I was dumbfounded when my anaesthetist colleague, an educated, well-trained, very knowledgeable doctor, he entered the pre-op area wearing a gown, double gloves, a mask and a face shield, and he spoke to the patient from 1 metre away without touching the patient. He looked like he was in one of those viral protective breakout gear seen in the movies. HIV is not transmitted through airborne route. Standard precautions are required. No double gloves are needed. Presiding Officer, I was shocked to hear from Nathan Sparling of HIV Scotland only yesterday when he said that double gloving recommendations are still made today when dealing with our elderly HIV-positive persons. And the prejudice and stigma still remains as persons with HIV are still placed on the end of dental lists or clinic reviews. This is not needed. Standard precautions are adequate when dealing with any blood-borne virus patient. I'm therefore pleased to endorse and indeed encourage health professionals across Scotland to view HIV Scotland's Roadmap to Zero document, which contains important information about tackling stigma. Presiding Officer, at a World AIDS Day event in Parliament last week, I sat next to one of the poets, James McAbraham, who recited his poem from a wee book called Disclosures, Rewriting the Narrative About HIV. In James's poem, the opening lines describe how it had been such a long time since someone touched him. It was James's poem that reminded me of that experience in the pre-op area 28 years ago. Presiding officer, as time progresses, new drugs started to become available. Words like protease inhibitors, antiretrovirals and heart therapy have become common in our vocabulary. While in Los Angeles, a famous basketball player, Magic Johnson, announced that he had an undetectable viral load. Undetectable was not a cure, as the media touted. Undetectable equals untransmissible. You must remember that. He was a heterosexual man, and this was big, huge news. Magic Johnson could not pass on the virus through sex. This is the message that we need to share today. Undetectable equals untransmissible. Presiding officer, I'm pleased that Scotland is a leader in the fight against HIV and AIDS. We are meeting the United Nations 90-90-90 targets. These are that by 2020, 90% of all people living with HIV will know their HIV status, and 90% of all people diagnosed with HIV will have access to sustained antiretroviral therapy, and that 90% of the people in receipt of the antiretroviral therapy will have viral suppression or a negative viral load. If we can find, reach and test the 10% of Scots that have not been tested, we can initiate treatment so that the virus will not be passed on and shared. Once a diagnosis is made, it means treatment can begin. Today in Scotland, HIV is considered a manageable long-term health condition with treatments such as pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, that allows people to be protected. Testing has a central role to play in reducing the number of infections, particularly by helping to reduce the proportion of HIV cases that are undiagnosed. Testing is as simple as a finger prick blood sample. Results are known immediately. People can be tested at sexual health clinics, GP surgeries, home self-testing is available, and community projects also. In conclusion, I'd like to emphasise the importance of the need to fight stigma attached to this disease. It has a damaging impact on the physical and mental health of the people both living with HIV and those who are thinking about being tested. Presiding officer, I look forward to hearing my colleagues' contributions in this debate, and once more I'd like to reiterate that U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, and I encourage everyone to know their HIV status. Thank you.